Democrats are vying for a potential blue wave in this year's midterm elections. The stage is already being set across the nation. 8 states held primaries Tuesday. Among the most watched battlegrounds, California, where Democrats are looking to make major gains in their fight to take control of the House. To help break down last night's elections, I'm joined by CBSN political contributor and founding partner of 270 Strategies, Lynda Tran, as well as Boston Herald columnist Michael Graham, who's also a CBSN political contributor. Greetings to you both.
Great to be here.
All right, so Lynda, to you first. The biggest fear for Democrats in California was being shut out of key congressional races in the November election. Explain why that is and how things are looking for Democrats at this point.
Sure. California is very unique in the way that it runs its elections. Since 2010, it's had what's called a top 2 or jungle primary, where the top 2 vote getters in any election end up advancing into the general election. And what that has been intended to do is to moderate the kinds of views that you're getting from candidates that run for office. But what has ended up happening is there's been this fear that if you ended up with too many Democrats running in any individual primary election, that they would split the vote so much that you would end up advancing Republicans to the general election. And in a little over half a dozen races in California, that could have meant that there would be 2 Republicans in all of the seats that could be flipped by Democrats coming this fall. So that was a big fear heading into yesterday. Although the results aren't final yet, it looks like that's not going to be the case, and Democrats are going to be in contention in a number of important races this fall.
So barely squeaking by. Michael, Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom will face off against Trump-backed businessman John Cox in November's race for governor. The president has tweeted about Mr. Cox even as early as today. How much of an influence is President Trump having on voters in California?
Well, it has an impact in the primary. There was a gathering a few weeks ago with Newt Gingrich and some others to get President Trump to make some kind of endorsement because Mr. Cox has been, shall we say, less than enthusiastic about Donald Trump in the past. And I don't know if you've heard, Vlad, but sometimes he's known to hold a bit of a grudge. And so since Cox voted for the Libertarian...
I hadn't heard that.
I know. I love breaking news here on CBSN. And since Mr. Cox voted for the Libertarian instead of for Donald Trump, there was a bit of an issue. I also want to add something, the broader picture. We get focused on the horse races. I think last night was a good night for Democrats across the country because, historically speaking, first midterm when a president and his party hold power, the other party does very, very well. Democrats wanted normal. If normal happens in November, they have a good November. And I think last night from coast to coast, it was largely normal, which is good news for Democrats.
You know, the president tweeted the Trump impact was really much bigger than anyone ever thought possible. So much for the big blue wave. It may be a big red wave working hard. Lynda, your reaction to that?
I mean, the president, as we know, likes to speak in extremes, and that tweet is no different than what we've heard from him before. And truth be told, he did not have a bad night last night. You know, he backed John Cox in California, his candidate in Montana, which has become important to him in his kind of feud that he's built up with John Tester. You know, he advanced to the general, and he is got to be excited about that. That said, the fact that Democrats were, again, not shut out of a bunch of races in California bodes well for Democrats who are hoping to take enough seats in the House to get back to a majority.
Yeah, your point about Montana is an important one. Meanwhile, Michael, over in Alabama, this one is really kind of interesting. Congresswoman Martha Roby is now facing a runoff because she was one of the first members of Congress to withdraw support from then candidate Trump in the wake of that infamous Access Hollywood tape. She said that she could not back him. And as you pointed out, Michael, you know, the president is known for holding grudges with, you know, some of his opponents. And so now she's facing this runoff. What do you think is going to go down there?
What it makes it even more fascinating is the guy in the runoff is a Democrat who she beat before, who voted to make Nancy Pelosi Speaker when he was in Congress. And so now we have to decide, what do Alabama voters hate more? People who vote against Trump or people who vote for Nancy Pelosi? And that's a tough one. It is just an amazing time to be in politics. I also think we should mention that on the good night for Republicans, that the Senate so far, the chances of Democrats taking the Senate continue to fade as Republicans nominate solid, acceptable nominees. Remember back when West Virginia was up in the air and you thought we might do another Alabama-style Roy Moore candidate. Last night, Montana, as was mentioned, very, very good. So there is good news on both sides of the aisle from last night.
And Michael, 2 Republicans in New Jersey, just across the border from where we are right now, are retiring from some very red districts. Were Democrats able to turn them blue this primary?
I think that they're in a great shape. New Jersey's not a good state for Donald Trump. It would be the first time in modern memory there wouldn't be a single Republican in the northern part of the state. What's interesting is the other races going on. Bob Menendez only got 60-ish% of the vote against basically a blank, like a woman no one had heard of.
Right.
And it shows how weak he is. The Republican, Hugan, has a ton of money to spend. And I think the magic sauce for Republicans in New Jersey is not the chance of beating Menendez when there's such an anti-Trump wave, but forcing Democrats to spend money in a state that they do not want to spend money in.
Yeah, and Lynda, that's a great point, because there's a message that's being sent in New Jersey with Bob Menendez.
Absolutely. I mean, Bob Menendez and the corruption trial that he had went through for a long period of time, it's clearly had an impact on him. And the fact that somebody who is in such a powerful position, Senate Foreign Relations Committee, has been a longtime incumbent in New Jersey and only drew something like 62% of the vote is definitely a really sharp rebuke against him among Democratic voters there. That said, you know, New Jersey is extraordinarily Democratic, and it is a year that has really motivated and energized people to come out simply because they are opposed to the policies and the things that they're seeing coming out of the White House. And Donald Trump has loomed large in the primaries from yesterday, and I expect he will continue to do so in the general election.
But, Michael, Democrats can't just expect to run on not being Donald Trump, right? I mean, at the end of the day, all of these races, all of these elections coming up in the midterms are going to have to deal with some of the issues that people are facing right now. And we just recapped some very strong economic numbers. And so for a lot of Republicans who might have been maybe 6 months ago worried that there might be a blue wave coming, maybe the president is right in his tweet that it might not necessarily be a red wave, but perhaps they might be able to hold off some of these encroachments from Democrats.
I remember when we were talking back in December, Vlad, and it just looked like Republicans had no chance, like just go home, call the game, you know, don't even bother. The fact that they're competitive, the fact that you just had a new polling out from CBS showing that control of the House is a toss-up is amazing. I thought it was interesting that the new Morning Consult poll today shows that while there is still an advantage for Democrats in the generic ballot, if you look at the competitive districts, that generic ballot advantage is very, very narrow. And so with Republicans, for example, in California, some of the Republicans who could be in real trouble, you know, some of them got 30, 35, 40% of the vote in this two-tier primary, but others actually did pretty well. They got in the 50s. And so I'm with you. I don't think Democrats can take anything for granted. I think this is a strange, strange year. At the same time, Democrats do not need anything other than hating Trump. Hating Trump is absolutely enough to win. The question is, where will Trump and the Republicans be in November?
All right, and before we let you go, Lynda, I got to ask you about this. Women across the country are poised to make history come these general elections in November. Which candidates are you watching, and why are they so significant?
Well, there are so many to choose from, and actually last night we saw a pair of women in Iowa take District 1 and District 3 there, the Cedar Rapids area and Des Moines area, one of whom, Abby Finkenauer, is only 29 years old, a state legislator, and she kind of blew it out, despite the fact that she was up against very strong male candidates in the Democratic primary. So there's no question that the women are stepping up, the women are stepping forward, and they are having an impact already. We'll see what happens as we head into the general.
All right, Lynda Tran, Michael Graham, always great to see you both. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.